Right then, let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast powered by MK Battery. MK Battery support continues to make a real difference right across the sport, from grassroots participation and equipment provision through to the elite end of competition. And for 25-26, they're not just powering this podcast, they're powering every official WFA National League live stream, helping us share every goal, every save, every story with the wider Powerchair football community. A big thank you as well to Slater and Gordon, title sponsors of the WFA National League. Their backing has helped to elevate both the Premiership and Championship with greater professionalism and visibility. And also a shout out to Swizzles, whose partnership underpins our National League Awards, celebrating the standout performances and contributions that make each game week so special. Today, we're recapping Gameweek One of the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership. 2 days, 26 matches and 68 goals to kick off the campaign. The early picture, Aspire and Newcastle setting the pace, joint top on 13 points apiece. Remarkably, neither conceded a goal all weekend. Greenbank made a statement. Teesside posted the biggest win of the round with that 7-0 win over Throstles. Leeds looked sharp with 3 wins, and West Bromwich Albion finished the weekend unbeaten with 4 clean sheets. At the other end, tough starts for Sevenoaks, GBG, Knights and Muscle Warriors, who will all look to reset before game week 2. My name is Ryan Sipple, and joining me to sift through it all, match by match, team by team, is Charlie McLellan. Charlie, great to have you back. You were across a lot of the action this weekend, watching, analysing, commentating. How did you find it?
I thought it was great. It was actually one of my favourite National League weekends to date. There was a real drama and anticipation. Felt like this season is probably the least certain things have been going into it. And I think we learned a lot from that first weekend about what the season's going to look like and who to have stocks in and who maybe are in a bit of trouble. It was a great weekend to watch, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Production was great as always, and the setup. And I just love being at Nottingham. It's just fantastic. Like, there's just such a great vibe around National League weekends that you don't really get at any other sporting event, I don't find.
No, I completely agree. There is a real magic about it, and the Premiership kicked off in the absolute perfect way. I think there is elements of the National League, the Premiership particularly, that are predictable. You expect to happen, but there's more unpredictability around it. So many question marks around teams, around players, around coaches. And that played out so interestingly across Game Week 1. Same as format as our Championship recap. We'll go through all of the teams in the division, covering results, performances, standout players. We'll have the live table up alongside us with all the stats. I encourage any of our listeners to do the same. FA Full-Time or the WFA Scoreline app are the best places to do that. We'll start with 12th and work our way up the table to the now league leaders, Aspire. So in 12th, we've got Muscle Warriors, and I think baptism of fire is the perfect way to describe their return to the Premiership. 4 games played, 4 games lost. It's been almost or more than a decade since they last competed at this level. And I don't think any amount of preparation can really ready you for the intensity, the speed, the consistency of the top flight. Their fixture list was brutal. Aspire leads West Bromwich Albion and Newcastle United Foundation, 4 of the best sides in the country, all across one weekend. It's no surprise that the results didn't go their way, but there was encouraging moments to take from it. They opened with back-to-back 4-0 defeats to Aspire and Leeds, which sound heavy, but they were professional performances from two title contenders. So you would never really give Muscle Warriors a great deal of hope getting any points from them. On Sunday, they found a little bit more rhythm. It was a fairly wild game against West Bromwich Albion. They lost 6-2, but they showed bravery, scoring twice on the counter through quick transitional play, clever positioning. It was, I think, the first glimpse of what this team could offer once they settle into the pace of Premiership football. And then the final game against Newcastle United Foundation, another powerhouse. And while they were beaten 3-0, they were more compact, more organised, and it felt like things were beginning to take shape. Charlie, it's never easy coming back into the Premiership after such a long absence, especially with a run like that to start. What did you make of Muscle Warriors across the weekend and how Alan Murray managed his squad?
Yeah, you're right. It's never easy, and I genuinely believe that Muscles had probably the most difficult fixture list of any team in that first weekend. Aspire, Leeds, West Brom, Newcastle. Yeah, it's just not. It's brutal. It's absolutely horrific for them as a start. What I would say is that I think you mentioned the way Alan Murray managed his squad. I think that they really, by the end of the weekend, will have learnt a lot about themselves, about how they want to set up, about which combinations work and which don't. There was a lot of in-game management, which was nice to see. A lot of things being tried out in games, because I think something we mentioned on commentary is Muscle Warriors, realistically, their ambition this season would be to try and stay in the league and solidify their place in the top flight. You don't need to pick up points in your first weekend or even your second weekend to do that, to be honest. You can get away with putting a run together in the final 2 game weeks of the season and, getting a couple of wins, and that might keep you up in the league. It's not a huge amount of points you're looking for to stay up. You estimate between sort of 12 and 14, maybe slightly more this season, because it feels like that bottom half of the table is a lot more closer than it has in recent years. Feels like there's a real sort of 2 leagues going on already in the division, but you can afford not to pick up points on your opening weekend, and I think they will have learned things. I'll take positives from, obviously, West Brom. They managed to score 2 goals against them, which get 2 Premiership goals in your first weekend is good. I know they were a bit of freak goals where awkward ricochets, and that was probably a product of West Brom's system not quite functioning how it should. But still, goals are goals, and I genuinely thought the performance was decent from Muscle Warriors. I thought, Sean Donaher has obviously improved them. He's been there, done it before against the top teams. He's played against all of the top teams in the world, obviously with Midlands United in Ireland, so he will know how to do it, and with the Irish national team as well. And yeah, I think they're adapting. They will be a much better team than they were this weekend by the end of the season.
Yeah, I think you can see what they're trying to build. There was structure, there was intent, and even though the results weren't there, I think there was learning from every single game. I think Alan used this weekend as an opportunity to experiment. To your point, Charlie, you don't necessarily need to pick up points in your first weekend. So he's trying to work out, firstly, his strongest central pairing. I think he landed on that being Hannah Hindley and Jacob Vickers. And then it's the best pairing out wide. We saw Henry Barnard, Sean Donaher, Dakota Hannam, Rickenshaw all feature at different points as he looked to build that consistency and chemistry. Quick shout out to Hannah Hindley, who made history during Gameweek One. Her goal against West Bromwich Albion means she's now the only player to have scored for 6 different clubs in the National League. A fantastic achievement, and it's a moment that she'll no doubt remember for a long time. This has been highlighted on the podcast before, Charlie. Hazard a guess as to the 6 teams that she scored a National League goal for?
Oh, okay. Well, Muscles, Leeds, who else? I'm trying to remember who she played for. She used to live down south? Has she played for like any southern teams?
No, I don't believe she has.
Yeah, I'm
I'll
not going to
cut
get
to
this.
Leeds Chariots, Leeds Dynamos. I think it's Manchester United, Hull and East Yorkshire, Muscle Warriors, of course, and I think Telford is the sixth. I'm sure she will correct me, but that's just off the top of my head. I haven't got definitive confirmation of that. Realistically, though, when we go back to Muscle Warriors, game weeks 1 and game weeks 2 were always going to be about survival and learning. Their early fixtures are front loaded with the league's elite, and you can't judge them too harshly based on those. The real test and the opportunities that we'll say across this podcast when we're talking about that bottom bracket is getting points against the teams around you. So for Muscle Warriors, you're looking at GBG Knights, you're looking at Sevenoaks, Middlesbrough. Those are the games that will define their season. And if they learn quickly, they build a stronger defensive base and keep believing in what they're doing, then there's absolutely a path to survival. It's going to be a season of moments, picking their battles, staying patient, and turning those small improvements into results.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's now progress to 11th. We have GBG Knights. They share a very similar story to Muscle Warriors. 4 games played, 4 defeats, and still searching for their first goal of the campaign. It will no doubt frustrate them massively because across large spells of the weekend, there were encouraging signs that don't quite show up in the results. Their opener against Newcastle United Foundation, and we'll touch on later how superb Newcastle were. Knights were compact, disciplined, but couldn't quite keep up with the tempo of Newcastle's rotations and Ollie Crawshaw, who's just an absolute standout. 6-0 defeat to Teesside followed, which on paper looks heavy, but the context is key. Teesside were unstoppable in that one. Mitch Tinkler scored 5, and it was one of those performances where almost any team in the division would have struggled to contain them. Sunday, though, was a very different story for me. Their match against Villa Rockets was my favourite of the weekend. End-to-end football, plenty of energy, and for long periods, I actually thought GBG Knights were the better side. They were brave in possession. They played through pressure and created a number of chances. It was just an unfortunate set-piece routine that Villa took via Dave Lewis, and then it was an unfortunate own goal that sealed it. But that was more because GBG were pushing numbers forward in search of that equaliser. Not a great deal to read into, but there was so many positive signs, and off the back of that, I remember saying if they play like that across their 22 league games, they will have more than enough to maintain Premiership status. But frustratingly for me, frustratingly for them, that momentum just didn't carry into their final fixture. 1-0 loss against Middlesbrough, and after showing so much ambition against Villa, they never quite got going. They struggled to get out their own half. They couldn't find rhythm. And in the end, a lapse in concentration, a little bit of naivety, inexperience from Oscar Smedley allowed Carl Forster to find the winner. And to make matters worse, they had a golden chance to equalise late in the first half via a penalty, which Kai Shah missed. So it's such fine margins. But those are the moments that change narratives, that change success and the end picture. If those small details fall their way, we could easily be talking about GBG Knights sitting on 6 points instead of none. Charlie, what did you make of GBG Knights across game week 1? Because while results look tough, there was flashes of quality there.
Yeah, 100%. Some of the football they played was really nice. You mentioned that Villa game. I think I was commentating on the other court at the time, but all I heard was just blood and thunder from that court. Like, the supporters were going crazy. I was hearing all the contact. Yeah, it sounded like a great game, and I've been back and watched it, and yeah, it was fantastic. I think, yeah, that Middlesbrough game is the big kicker for them. I think they would have loved to have got their first 3 points of the season in that one. They were definitely good value for a win in that one, but Middlesbrough just used their extra bit of experience and just saw it out. I think I think they will take a lot of positives from the weekend. They've got a squad that is very decent. They seem to have good chemistry. It just feels like when it clicks, it'll click for them. You look at what's coming up for them, and they've got games against Muscle Warriors and Seven Oaks and teams that you'd suspect are going to be down towards the bottom of that league. And if they can learn from that Middlesbrough game and get as up for the Middlesbrough game as they did for example, the Newcastle or the Villa game, because it almost doesn't matter how good you are against teams like Teesside and Newcastle, because most of the time, unless you literally all of your players play the best games of their career, you're gonna really struggle against those teams. Whereas Middlesbrough, that's a game you should really be getting up for. They should have almost been in second gear for the entire weekend, and then when that last game comes along against Middlesbrough, you sort of just go for it then. That's really how it should have looked for me. It's a shame that it didn't for GBG. But then again, as we said with Muscles, and I think as we'll reiterate for all of the teams down there at the bottom of the league right now, it's a long season ahead. And it's all it takes is a couple of results for your form to turn. Yeah, I think GBG will look at it and they will be frustrated with some of it, but also they'll hopefully be able to see the bigger picture and see that it was their first Premiership weekend and they will get improved as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think you summarised it perfectly earlier, that this is almost, there's two tables, there's two packs within this division. And if you are the likes of Muscle Warriors or GBG Knights in this case, and if you're referencing the table as we are right now, you can almost divide it right in the middle. And if you are a team that would be content with Premiership status come the conclusion of 25-26, you look to beat any of the teams that are placed between 7th and 12th. They are going to be your best opportunities to get point accumulation. And if you focus your energy, your determination, your tactical flexibility in those ones, you should be okay. In that Villa match for GBG, they showed what this team can be when it clicks. George Holloway really caught the eye for me. Sharp, confident, and full of intent every time he got on the ball. You can see he's taken the confidence from his phenomenal championship season where he finished top goal scorer. Oscar Smedley, who we spoke about during the predictions episode of the podcast, was used conservatively in Gameweek One, often sitting deepest as the almost defensive anchor. That limited his attacking impact, but it's worth remembering this was his first taste of Premiership football. This is only his second ever National League season. And you have to really be careful with how much you expose these players to so early on in their careers. But he's a brilliant prospect and will grow quickly once he adjusts to the pace of this division. Kai Shah had bright moments too, operating both wide and centrally. You can see the value in his ability to drive into those wide channels and deliver those early crosses or those angled shots. And if they can fine-tune that link-up play, success will come. I have no doubt about it. Kai Shah, for instance, is now going to be my shining example and case study to young aspiring wide players of how to position your chair and how to advance up the court. He's constantly in reverse and can execute a 180 better than most. So I was really impressed with that aspect. Jack Ewins, for me, he's the heartbeat. Everything they did well flowed through him. He wore the goalkeeper shirt, but essentially played as almost like a box-to-box playmaker, dictating the rhythm, linking the phases, the attack and the defence. He'll be absolutely central to any success they have this season. So very impressed with that. And a word as well for Ben Keats, travelling over from Australia for each National League weekend. It's an incredible commitment. The time, the cost, the effort, it deserves huge respect. And he showed glimpses of real quality too. And like Smedley, he'll only improve as he settles into the speed of the Premiership, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, fair play to Ben Keats, because that is, as you said, an insane level of commitment. Just shows the levels that some people will go to for this sport. Unbelievable. Um, and yeah, I mean, it must have been a tough weekend with him. I assume, I don't know, but I assume he hasn't had a huge amount of training time with the team leading up into nationals, because obviously he only comes over for the weekends. But I think he will grow into it and he will learn a lot from this season. And as you said, about Kai and wingers playing reverse and stuff like that, I just hope this is things that Ben then takes back to Australia, to his teammates in Australia, and teaches to them. Because I think, I think that the English way of playing is a fantastic way. Wingers in reverse, it's so exciting. And often when we watch teams from, for example, Australia, as you and I did with Western Sydney World Cup, I get frustrated because they don't use that sort of, feels like almost just an easy hack to do as a winger that they don't use, always driving forward. And I just hope that that's something that Ben learns and develops while he's here, and then takes back and uses it to improve not only his game, but the game of everyone in his home country as well. But you mentioned the squad, and it is a really good squad that GBG have. Oscar Smedley is a player that I'm really excited about too. Um, Watched him a bit in the championship last season and just heard so many good things about him. Just the predictions episode, as you mentioned, and just word of mouth has all been so positive about Oscar Smedley. So I think he's gonna have a good season. And it doesn't surprise me that he was used maybe sparingly in the opening weekend, because, as you said, adjusting to a new level. Players like Kai Shah have been here before, but he's not. And hopefully it will be a season of steady improvement for him.
Yeah, completely agree. Looking ahead to game week 2, you could almost split their weekend into two halves. I think Saturday sees them face West Bromwich Albion and Leeds PSC, two extremely difficult fixtures where any point would surely be seen as a massive bonus. But Sunday could be decisive. They meet Sevenoaks and Muscle Warriors, the two teams either side of them in the standings. And those are the fixtures that will define their season. As we will say time and time again when we're talking about the momentum of this bottom pack, pick up 3, 4, maybe even 6 points from game week 2, and suddenly the picture changes completely. If there's one thing we know about this team, is that they can score goals. Last season in the Championship, they netted 81 times, more than any other team in the entire National League. So to go a whole weekend without scoring feels almost alien, but it won't last, because once they find that first goal, I think the confidence will flow. It's going to be about moments, belief, taking their chances, because the performances are there. So overall, I'm impressed with GBG Knights. Next in the standings, in 10th place, are Sevenoaks PFC. And while the table shows a similar record to the two sides below them, 4 defeats from 4, the story feels a little different. Unlike GBG Knights and Muscle Warriors, the margins between success and failure for Sevenoaks were incredibly fine. They opened with a 4-0 loss to Leeds, which I'd almost set aside in the wider context. We know the quality, the precision Leeds bring. They can dismantle any side on their day. And for a newly reshaped Sevenoaks team, that was always going to be a tough start. But after that, the games began to become much tighter. Defeats, yes, to Greenbank, Newcastle United Foundation and Throstles, but they were all by a single goal. 2-1, 1-0 or 1-0 respectively. That tells you a lot about their organisation, their compactness, and how difficult they are to break down. And that's normally the difference between a team maintaining Premiership status and being relegated, that defence. More so than the than the attacking threat, because goal difference can sometimes play such an important role. The match I commentated on, the 1-0 loss to Newcastle United Foundation, was a great contest. Newcastle, they dominated possession, they territory, and Sevenoaks defended brilliantly. It was the James Mason and Kyle Alexander show for much of the game. Two players who read danger exceptionally well, organising the back line, nullifying one of the most dangerous attacks in the league. And on another day, they probably would have come away with a point. It took a controversial late goal to separate the sides, which has been widely scrutinised and discussed following the conclusion of the weekend. It was a corner fired into Ollie Crawshaw. His first shot was saved by James Mason. The rebound was then prodded home by the Newcastle captain, and depending on who you ask, was either went over the line or was cleared on the line. The officials ruled that the ball had fully crossed and Newcastle were awarded the goal. From my position in the commentary area, I could understand Sevenoaks' frustration. My angle wasn't perfect, but it looked incredibly tight. Ultimately, though, you have to trust the officials' view. They're in the sport to make those calls. And in truth, Newcastle probably edged it in terms of attacking bravery. So they will feel they should have come away with 3 points. Sevenoaks will protest the 1 point. If we get to the end of the season and 1 point's the difference between Sevenoaks staying up or going down, then we may come back to this moment. Charlie, when you look at Sevenoaks, especially that structure they've built defensively, do you get the sense that they've got enough about them to turn these narrow defeats into results?
Yeah, I do actually. I think first of all, it was so, as you mentioned, such fine margins this weekend for Sevenoaks. Losing 3 games by only a goal is very unlucky. I think in some ways they were the architect of their own downfall, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But that central core of James Mason and Kyle Alexander is more than good enough to beat, especially the teams around them in the table. I think they'll struggle against the top teams that really move the ball quickly, because I think they'll get pulled apart quite a lot. But when they can sort of sit in and defend, little beavers defending their dam, it works very well. I think they will look back at the weekend with some regret, though. For example, I commentated the game against Greenbank, who had an amazing weekend, which we'll talk about later on. And the goals they conceded were really poor. Like, one of them was it was from a Sevenoaks goal kick, and they kicked it straight down the middle of the pitch. And rather than take it under control, Kyle Alexander sort of just moved away from the ball and let it through to the goalkeeper, who was Jacob Buck-Platt, who just smashed it out to the wing. And then all of a sudden, you've got Marcus Harrison reversing down the line, and he's just smashed it across in his reverse spin, and then Fitzpatrick's finished it at the back post. And one of the main things you don't want to let teams with players like Marcus Harrison, Jacob Buck-Platt do is get that ball moving really quickly. And they've literally just given him an opportunity to have a rolling ball come towards him where he can just smash it out wide. And I was like, that's really frustrating, especially because Sevenoaks actually went on to go 2-0 down. Marcus Harrison scored. There wasn't a huge amount they could do about that one. But then they scored a fantastic goal themselves, Sevenoaks, through George Shippey, who was excellent all weekend. I thought George Shippey was a big positive for Sevenoaks. He was great in that game, like really good. If they hadn't conceded that really sloppy goal earlier on, then that could have been an equaliser, and that would have been a point on the board as well. I think the Newcastle game is going to cause debate. What I would say is the camera angle can be very deceptive. I don't know if you've ever seen that clip of Gary Neville a few years ago. It was after that Newcastle Arsenal game that was really controversial in the Premier League, and he had all the different cameras in different areas showing what a ball looks like in and out. So I'd be careful to, we've seen some screenshots posted from the WFA live stream. I'd be careful to get drawn in too much by that. And I'd also say that, Ollie genuinely believes that the ball crossed the line. James genuinely believes that it didn't. And the officials obviously had a great view of it. So it happens. And also, you say fine margins. I know Sevenoaks weren't happy about it, and that's what the social media it's all been decently lighthearted. But they weren't happy about it. But then I sort of popped in a clip of in that Throstles game when James Mason saved a penalty and moved about, a good couple of seconds early, and so decisions, the referees can't get all of them right, and generally across the season, they even themselves out, and you saw that across the weekend. So they sort of have themselves to blame. And I also thought that Throttles performance after a really good weekend from Sevenoaks was quite poor, I have to say. I thought that was the game that they should have been really targeting to get some points out of. And, the fact that they could have been two shows that they probably didn't put in their best performance. I mean, Throttles were great, but those are the games they need to start grinding out results in. But as you said, it was an early season. Obviously, the lead's 4-0. They only had 3 players for it as well because of classification issues. So that's very tough, just instantly very tough. But yeah, I think overall, a decent weekend from Sevenoaks. Performances to build on. That defensive partnership is a great platform to build off of, and they will take positives from it and move on.
Yeah, I mean, that solid spine they've got has come from years of building understanding between James Mason and Kyle Alexander. Their communication and positioning are excellent. The challenge now is connecting that defensive base with their attacking play. Like you, George Shippey really impressed me. It's his full Premiership season or Premiership debut, and he's clearly been trusted to step into that Harry Bestwick-shaped void after he's moved to West Brom. It's a big responsibility, but I think he handled it superbly. Miles Miller is another who deserves credit. Such a clever player when it comes to chair angles and positioning. Few are better at ensuring that passes, ricochets, interceptions bounce favourably off his chair rather than toward his own goal. And a lot of people could learn from that. Stanley Ball, another really exciting young talent, full of energy, intent, raw potential. Excited to see how he develops. Once that defence starts linking more effectively with the attack, the goals will come. They've never been an overly prolific side. I think last season, 7 of their 8 wins came by a single goal margin, the other by just 2. So it's all about staying compact, disciplined, doing enough to edge those fine battles rather than dominate opposition outright. I agree. They'll be very frustrated with how Gameweek 1 ended. That 1-0 defeat to Throstles. Any momentum they had gathered in that Newcastle game, irrelevant of the end outcome, wasn't there. They no doubt earmarked that as a real chance to take something from the weekend, and they just didn't have the quality they needed to get anything from it. Looking ahead to game week 2, it's another mixed challenge. They face Aspire and West Brom back-to-back on Saturday, I think. 2 very tough fixtures where containment, again, will be key. It's firefighting. It's reactive, not proactive. But Sunday gives them a huge opportunity. They play Middlesbrough and Muscle Warriors. Again, both in that same bracket near the bottom. If they take 3 or 6 points from those 2, they could head into the Christmas break in a really strong position, clear of the danger zone.
100%. There are some points there that they will see themselves achieving very clearly. And I honestly think they'll be fine this season, Sevenoaks. I'd back them to stay up.
Yeah, I did prior to the season kicking off, and assuming those 2 young players can get up to the pace of the Premiership quickly, contribute in way of goal scoring, I agree. In 9th, we've got Middlesbrough, 5 games played, 1 win, 4 defeats, and I think that perfectly illustrates just how fine the margins are at the bottom of the Premiership. Like many of the teams around them, they faced a fairly brutal opening schedule. West Brom, Aspire, Leeds among their first 5 fixtures. Those are incredibly tough tests for any side, and it's why I tend to use their matches against teams closer to them in the standing as a real barometer of where they're at. The first of those was a 1-0 defeat to West Bromwich Albion Throstles, and it could not have been tighter. It took one moment of real quality, an incredible assist from Thomas Donoghue, pinpoint across the box to Abigail Bolt, who converted. And that's just how fine the margin is, how fine the line is between victory and defeat at this level. Because Borough were disciplined, they were competitive, and just one decisive pass away from potentially taking something from it. Then came the flip side of that narrative. They're meeting with GBG Knights. This time, it was Middlesbrough who seized the moment. A quick counter, Kath Goldsborough firing the ball down the line, Cole Forster reading it perfectly. He saw a gap by Oscar Smedley's near post and arrowed it in a space with real precision. It was a great goal. And it was one chance, it was one strike, and it was 3 points. That is the level of detail we're talking about. These games turn with one single moment. So 3 points from their opening 5 matches isn't a bad return in the grand scheme of things. As we've said before, roughly a win per weekend is often enough to keep you safe come the end of the season. So they're giving themselves a platform to build on. Charlie, when you look at Middlesbrough's start, the result, the balance of their performances, that win over GBG, what stood out most for you?
Yeah, I thought the win against GBG is obviously the big one for them. That was the game that they would have been targeting the most. I think they'll be frustrated that they couldn't get a point out of Throstles because, as you said, there was very little in that game. It could have gone either way, and sometimes it just takes a moment of quality to win those games. And it was a fantastic goal from Throstles, but I think that they'll be really happy with their performances in most of the games. I think the West Brom game, they obviously were very tightly beaten. The goal they conceded was poor, really poor. For a team that have the Premier League experience now, who have been in the top division for a while, to just give the ball to West Brom off a goal kick is very bad. And Brad Bates just front bumpered it into an empty goal. Those are the fine margins that we're talking about, and when you do it against a team that just are used to winning like West Brom, they're always just going to punish you for it. The Leeds game, fantastic to go into half-time 1-0 up. Obviously, they'll be frustrated with how quickly in the second half they conceded, because I think if they'd even just weathered 5 minutes of the second half storm, the frustration for Leeds would have really taken hold and they would have got a bit desperate, and there would have maybe even been chances for Middlesbrough to double their lead on the counter-attack, with a similar goal to the one that put them ahead, which was just like smashed ball in their own half and it just rolls all the way into the goal. I think the disappointing performance for Middlesbrough would have been the Aspire one. I thought they got dragged into just being a bit over physical in that game, and Aspire just sort of, I think, capitalised on that. There was a lot of contact in that game. It was very robust. Me and you commentated it together and it was very fiery. Obviously, I think Middlesbrough were really unhappy with, there was an incident where Dan McLellan was just reversing, trying to get out wide, and he ended up accidentally reversing into Kath Goldsborough, who looked like she may have put herself in the way to win the foul, which would have been very intelligent play if that's what she did. Obviously, only she knows her intentions, but then there was quite a lot of contact and it was a bit nitty-gritty and stop-start, and Aspire just sort of saw it through. That'll be the disappointing performance for them, because some of the goals they conceded in that game weren't great. But Leeds was a massively positive performance. West Brom the same. Throstles they'll feel a little bit disappointed with, but then GBG getting that win, getting that first 3 points on the season on the board is massive. And they're another team that I'd back to maybe be out of trouble this season, because they just feel like they've got sort of, they feel like survival specialists almost, that they're just going to stay up by the skin of their teeth, whether that be through the playoffs or dramatic last weekend victories. I mean, you saw that it was that last weekend last season that really sort of took them out of trouble. They got some massive results late on in the season, and if they can just tick along until then, picking up the odd 3 points here and then hit the heights at the end of the season again, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly that. There's a solid foundation there. I thought Umar Hanif had an excellent weekend. Physical, committed, always puts himself right in the thick of things. James Found has established himself as a really dependable goalkeeper. and Kath Goldsborough seems to cover every inch of the court, supporting both in attack and defence. I think those three give Middlesbrough a real spine to build around. Where the uncertainty lies is that fourth attacking role. We saw Cole Forster, Thomas Pettigrew, Ethan Galloway all rotated in those wide channels, each offering something slightly different. The competition for that spot is incredibly fierce, and it will be about whoever can consistently produce an end product that will probably end up nailing that position going forward. There's also something to be said about the scheduling. Both Game Week 1 and Game Week 2 are 5-game weekends for them, meaning they'll have played 10 fixtures before Christmas. Of incredibly heavy workload, but it could actually help them in the latter stages of the campaign when intensity or quantity of games certainly dips, and they can have more time to rest, recuperate between the business end of the competition. December will be interesting. They face Greenbank, Teesside, Newcastle, 3 extremely tough opponents, but also Muscle Warriors and Sevenoaks. 2 sides yet to register a point. And actually, when you look across the bottom of the table, a lot of those teams meet each other in Game Week 2. So for the battle for safety could arguably be settled in Game Week 2 of the competition, which is crazy when you think about it. If Middlesbrough can take maximum points from those latter two fixtures, they'll sit on around 9 points heading into the new year. That's more than halfway to the target we're saying would register safety. I think they will want to ensure they're not drawn into that playoff position in 10th. I'd have to look back on seasons gone by to see what the average point accumulation for 9th is, but I would suspect it's probably around 18 to 21 points would be enough for safety from the conclusion of the season. So overall, a weekend of mixed fortunes, but there's more structure and belief in this Middlesbrough side than the table suggests. And if they can tighten those fine margins and find a bit of attacking consistency, they'll be right. I think they'll be clear of that scrap at the bottom. In 8th place, we've got Villa Rockets. A tough start to the season on paper. Just 3 points from their opening 4 games. But when you look at the quality of their opposition, I'd say that's probably par for the course. They faced the likes of Greenbank, Newcastle and Teesside, as well as GBG Knights. Their sides with pedigree and momentum. So to come out of that with a win and a couple of strong performances is a solid foundation. Their opener against Greenbank was not only frustrating, but incredibly disappointing, I have to say. They struggled to create anything going forward, largely because Greenbank's central pairing in Marcus Harrison and Torbjorn Karup locked the game down. Every lane, every angle, every passing option was cut off, and Villa just couldn't find their rhythm. It would have been easy to take that lack of momentum into the rest of the weekend. But I think that to their credit, they regrouped well. Their second match was a 1-0 defeat to Newcastle United Foundation. I think a really strong showing, actually. Newcastle were voted team of the weekend. We'll talk about them later. So to push them that close shows the level Villa can reach when they're structured and disciplined. Their highlight was the 2-0 win over GBG Knights, which, as I mentioned earlier, was one of the most entertaining matches across the entire weekend. Genuinely end-to-end stuff. But it was Villa's experience. That is their superpower, which gave them the clinical edge. And Dave Lewis was outstanding throughout, played every minute, commanded the court, and scored one of the goals himself. The impact of the bench of Rosie Hodgson can't be overstated. She came on, increased the tempo of the match, created several excellent chances herself. And then their final fixture of the weekend was a narrow 1-0 defeat to Teesside. And I think, I'd love to get your thoughts, Charlie, that one actually showed the best of Villa across the weekend. They started brilliantly, confident, brave and completely unafraid to take the game to the champions. For the first 10 minutes, they were clearly the better side. There was a huge moment early on where Rosie Hodgson had what should have been her first Premiership goal for Villa. She got herself into the right position. She struck the ball, and in the process, the left-hand post, as the viewers was watching it, was lodged out of its position, and then she had a secondary effort which rolled over the line. Having reviewed it and discussed with Jeff Lewis, this the beauty of having every game streamed now. It's clear the ball crossed the line before where the post was dislodged from. It should have been given as a goal.
Yeah, I mean that was a massive moment. It looked in the moment like it was a big miss from Rosie, but actually, I mean, it was a shot on target. Really, they were great in that Teesside game, Villa. Like, I was really disappointed with them in the Greenbank game. I thought that was a poor performance. You know, really just turgid to watch at times, but on that Sunday, they obviously went away on the Saturday night and discussed things, and it really clicked on that Sunday. Obviously, you mentioned the GBG game was one of the best games of the weekend, and it was. And then that Teesside game, Teesside weren't their usual best. They weren't their free-flowing, physical, creative best. But also, a lot of credit for them not being at their best has to go to Villa. The way they stifled them, I thought defensively they were great. Hamza Madir has just become such a dependable figure at the back for Villa. And yeah, they had chance after chance. They had some really good counter-attacks. Dave Lewis was just mammoth again. Yeah, it was really unlucky. They would have been very good value for a point out of that game. Very good value. If it had ended 1-1, I don't think Teesside could have had many complaints. It was a professional performance from the champions in the end, just to see it out. But for Villa, yeah, massively positive signs. They've got a weekend coming up. You know, it's a bit of you mentioned a weekend of two halves for Middlesbrough. It's a bit of a weekend of two halves for Villa as well, in terms of they've got Muscles and Throstles on that Saturday, and they'll be looking at that and thinking, right, we need to get 6 points there. They're two teams that we would ideally like to be below us in the table by the end of the season, so we have to get 6 points from those two games. But then the Sunday is brutal. It's a 3-game Sunday, which is actually very rare. You usually get your 3 games on the Saturday, and it's Aspire, West Brom and Leeds, which is just absolutely horrific. So they'll be looking at that and thinking, right, if we get 6 points on the board on Saturday and try and just get a point or maybe 2 out of that Sunday, that is horrible scheduling, actually, when you look at it. Poor Villa. But they're going to build into the season. Obviously, Rosie coming in, she's a big character with a lot of experience. Take a while for her to gel. I had concerns because obviously with her and Dave, they're both very big characters, very vocal on the court. I had concerns that could be quite a fractious dynamic, but they look to be getting on well, and the communication all looks to be very constructive and helpful. And so long may it continue. And I hope Villa, going into the rest of the season, will just grow into it as we expect.
Yeah, completely. That's something that I said in the previous episode of the podcast that focused on the Premiership anyway. Those characters for Villa are what stand out on a piece of paper. And my question to them, or the thing I wanted to see, is how they dealt with adversity, how they dealt with things when the going got tough. Do those big characters clash with one another, or do they look to find a constructive and beneficial outcome answer to the questions that are being posed? And I think they did that brilliantly. They seem really together, which is really encouraging. I think they're still trying to find their best combination, and that's natural at this stage when you bring new players, new characters into one system. You can see that they're still trying to strike the balance, the experience of Dave Lewis and Amir Ali blending with the emerging quality of players like Hamza Madir, Bobby Allen. Once that chemistry solidifies, I think they'll comfortably be kind of mid-table rather than near the relegation scrap. Dave Lewis is the heartbeat. He was the standout for me across their weekend. Reads the game so well, never panics, provides calm authority wherever he features on the court. Hamza Madir is another highlight, still learning, still adapting, but his positioning and confidence to receive under pressure are really encouraging signs. And you can tell the squad trust him. They're feeding him the ball in key moments, which says a lot about his growing influence. And I also want to take a moment to mention Bobby Allen. He's playing through some difficulty at the moment while awaiting a surgery date. You can see he's not quite at full capacity, but I really hope he gets back to his very best soon, because there's a sensational young player there with an incredibly high ceiling. And once he's back to full fitness, I think we'll see just how special he can be. As you said, Gameweek 2, an incredibly unique set of fixtures in terms of how they're laid out. They're going to have to put all of their energy, surely, on that Saturday to ensure they've got that 6 points and will have 9 points to their season's tally, because you wouldn't give them much hope getting anything from Sunday. So that's Villa. Next up, we've got West Bromwich Albion Throstles in 7th. And I have to say, Charlie, a fantastic weekend for them. We talk about teams taking their moments and picking their battles. They did it better than anyone. They've now matched their entire win tally from last season, which says everything about the progress they've made over the summer and the steps they've taken to ensure they're not part of that relegation dogfight again. Their weekend or season didn't start ideally. A 7-0 defeat to Teesside in their opening match. That kind of result could easily derail a side, especially one rebuilding confidence. But to their immense credit, they didn't let it define their weekend. They regrouped, they refocused, came back straight away with a hard-fought 1-0 win over Middlesbrough. A game we've already discussed, a real tactical battle, tight, cagey, but decided by a single moment of brilliance. The assist from Thomas Donoghue, which we can unpack a little bit more now, was absolutely sensational. Easily one of the best pieces of vision and execution you'll see all season. He threaded a pass through the smallest of gaps. Middlesbrough typically so stubborn, so compact, yet he picked out Abigail Bolt, arriving perfectly at the back post, and she finished beautifully. And I said it on commentary, we talk a lot about recognising goals of the season, but sometimes a truly great assist deserves just as much recognition and credit. As an award I'd love to see introduced or brought in. Maybe we will do that. Abigail Bolt rightfully voted the Swizzles Unsung Hero of the weekend. Her influence goes far beyond the court. Not only is she a key player, but she's also the team's head coach. Watching her across the weekend at the Lee Westwood Sports Centre, in the pre-match talk, at the half-time stage, managing rotations, talking to her subs, she is such a clear communicator. And those messages are calm, they're coherent, and they're full of confidence. And you can see the players responding to that leadership. Yes, they did lose 5-0 to Aspire on the Sunday morning, but again, it's about context. Aspire were relentless. Throstles didn't dwell on it. They came out in the afternoon, the perfect response, earning another narrow but deserved 1-0 win over Sevenoaks. Charlie, when you look at Throstles, what stood out most for you about their approach across Gameweek One?
I think it's what you mentioned. They just looked together. Last season, it looked like it was a tough situation. Obviously, they were being managed by Colin Gordon, who's a fantastic coach, but has a very sort of set idea of how he wants to play football. And I don't think the Throstles players really, they just didn't have the squad for it. And that's not like too much of a criticism, because I think one of the only teams that can actually play that football are the England national team. Like, I don't think many teams in the league could do it, but they just didn't have the squad for it. This season, they are using what they have, and that's what I think the best coaches do. And I gave so much credit to Abby Bolt. She got my vote for coach of the weekend and for unsung hero, I think, because she was just so the vision of a perfect leader, because picking up her players, she wasn't too critical. When they were conceding goals, she wasn't, like moaning or shouting at people. She was just, come on guys, let's go again. Um, Obviously she took her goal in the Throstles game fantastically. Um, that goal, wow, it was so good. It was like, that's the kind of goal you see teams like, Leeds and Teesside and Aspire scoring, like just those perfect passes, winger to winger. Um, what a fantastic goal. And yeah, they were just, they picked their battles, as you said. They did it so well. They got themselves up for the two biggest occasions, which were those two games, and they're halfway there already, you'd say, in terms of points. They'll back themselves now, and they will take so much confidence from that weekend. Tom Donaher was brilliant. So was Abby. Amy Lee Julian in the centre. Obviously, they had that chance. You speak about decisions maybe not going teams' way. They had that penalty, which actually wasn't a bad penalty at all, that got saved. It was pretty far in the corner, but the goalkeeper moved quite a bit early than maybe they should have. But yeah, overall, a fantastic weekend from Throstles. If I'm going to give a bit of constructive criticism, because I think that's important for every team, I'd say that the way they managed, I didn't manage to see much of them against Teesside, but the way they managed the Aspire game was quite poor, I'd say. They allowed Dan McLellan and John Dixon on the wings for Aspire to literally just have free roam, and you can't do that. Like, they will tear you to shreds, and that's what sort of happened. They were pulled apart. The power, the whole point against the big teams is you can't let them generate power on the ball, and they let Aspire generate so much power that they actually punctured one of the footballs. So that's probably not a good sign for Throstles. But in the smaller games, they seem to have the winning formula locked down. And yeah, I think that's the games they have to win. And also, if they defend the way that they have been and they improve that, then I could see them taking some shock points across the season as well. So fair play to Throstles, fair play to Abby, a deserved unsung hero. What a great weekend for them, and a great start to the season.
Yeah, I don't disagree with your assessment of the tactics. Teesside was very similar to the Aspire setup, maybe a little bit of complacency given the world-class talents, the England international, too much time, too much space to generate that power. But at the risk of contradicting ourselves, we have said that you're never likely to really get anything from these. Maybe they can look to be more compact, but they put their energy, they put their momentum in the games that are going to be season definers come the conclusion. So exactly, I think there's a clear sense of identity about them. Thomas Donaher, as you said, settled in brilliantly. He's got that creative spark. I have to say, despite it not going in the favour of the Republic of Ireland at the Ep Nations Cup, he steadily improved as the tournament went on, to the point where he was a really dependable central player come the conclusion of the tournament. And he's clearly taken that confidence in his own performances into the new campaign. You can see the team buying into a structure that almost opposite of what we saw last season. Regan Kemp remains kind of the constant in goal, steady, he's composed, while Amy Lee Julian offers consistency through the middle, which gave them a solid base in transition, certainly against the lower ranked sides in the division. I think it feels like everything around Throstles is starting to click into gear. They are compact against the lower teams. They work for each other. They look like they're enjoying their football again, which I would implore people not to underestimate within Powerchair football. Yes, this is the elite end of the sport. This is the top flight of Powerchair football in England, where we're here to win. But it should never... the competitiveness and the need to win should never be at the detriment of enjoyment and playing with a smile on your face, which we didn't see really last season, but there was elements of that in Gameweek One. When you compare to where they were 12 months ago, it's night and day. They're playing with a bit of clarity and purpose. And if they can keep that momentum and continue taking points from the sides around them, they'll be absolutely fine this season. Maybe even pushing towards the top half of the division. So impressed. Congratulations to Abigail Bolt for the Swizzles Unsung Hero of the weekend. Very much deserved. And we'll see how they fare in game week 2. Let's just see who they're facing. Tough weekend. But the funny thing is, there is no easy games, really, because you're either playing one of the top teams of the division or one of the lower ranked teams in the division that is in the same situation as you, desperately fighting for survival. They play Villa Rockets and Leeds PFC on the Saturday before West Bromwich Albion and GBG Knights on the Sunday. So just based on form, momentum, player profiles, they're probably looking at Villa and GBG Knights as the most credible opportunities to register points. Now, in 6th place, we have 5-time Premiership champions West Bromwich Albion. And I think it's fair to say we've almost hit the reset button with them. So many players come and gone in the last 2-3 years, the likes of Marcus Harrison, Dylan Kelso and others moving on to fresh challenges. The club has had to almost redefine what success looks like. For Chris Gordon and his group, it's been about evolution, almost recalibrating expectations, tightening the structure. And if you look at their Gameweek 1 results, they tell a fascinating story, because West Brom, long recognised as the pioneers almost as of bold, attacking, free-flowing football, but with all due respect, they were anything but that. This was a very different West Bromwich Albion, conservative, disciplined, and very difficult to break down. They opened with a narrow 1-0 win over Middlesbrough, a result that felt more functional than fluent, I think is probably a fair assessment. But what followed summed up this new look side perfectly. 3 consecutive 0-0 draws. And I've asked Jeff Lewis, when was the last time that occurred for West Brom in the Premiership division? And it's never occurred. They've never had 2 consecutive 0-0 draws. To have 3 is remarkable when you consider the free-flowing attacking heights that they've set. Without context, that might sound like a frustrating run, but when you consider the opposition, it's a fair outcome. Stalemates against Aspire, Newcastle and Greenbank, 3 title contenders, the 3 top teams in the division currently, all whom came into the fixture with serious momentum. So to take clean sheets from all 3 says everything about the defensive platform they've built. The partnership between Chris Gordon and Lucas Chrysler at the heart of their defence is becoming one of the most assured pairings in the division. We saw it in flashes last season. We saw it in at times at the Club World Cup. This weekend, it felt like the product of that understanding is finally clicking. Their communication, their space, and their ability to absorb pressure, but it has come at the detriment of their attacking flow. Charlie, it's a very different West Bromwich Albion, certainly from one we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. Less expansive, more pragmatic, but do you think that's a reflection of where they are right now, or maybe a conscious decision to rebuild from the back and then link up with the attack at a later stage?
I don't know, because I think what this weekend showed to me is that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think West Brom consider themselves as a genuine title contender this season. I think the way that they played, very defensive, so as trying not to lose, is sort of the way that I'd say teams that are batting out for 5th and 4th sort of play. I don't think they see themselves in that top fold, which I can understand. I think it's a massive season of rebuilding for West Brom. I mean, just going through their fixtures, the Middlesbrough one, I've already sort of touched on. It was just a moment of real naivety from Middlesbrough that gave them the goal. You know, you think in years gone by, that would have been a massive scoreline for West Brom in that game, and it wasn't. And then I was disappointed with the way that they played in a couple of the other games against Aspire and Newcastle. I think if this is a season of rebuild, they may as well start to install their identity as soon as possible. And it was very defensive from West Brom, especially in that Aspire game. It was like, when I say defensive, it was like Chris Gordon was taking kick-ins where, they tap it and then just wait for the player to engage them. And I've never seen that from a West Brom team before. It was just a completely different world. I think you're right to highlight Lucas Chrysler and Chris Gordon as a quality partnership in that central position. I think they were sort of let down by their wide players this weekend. They were getting them the ball, and they were doing nothing with it. Like they just were not in any way performing. The fact that they'd only scored one goal in their first 4 games, obviously they then went on to put quite a few past Muscle Warriors, but one goal in their first 4 games was just not the West Brom that I'm used to seeing. I think it's a season of transition. As long as they just don't lose hope and don't lose faith, West Brom will challenge back up at the top, whether that be next season, the season after. Not sure, but yeah, I thought, and also just the way that they sort of assess the performances. I think on social media after the Aspire game, West Brom are one of the most vocal and best run clubs on social media. The stuff they put out is very professional, and I think after the Aspire game, the message read, "Don't write us off," which suggests, which, I don't think you ever would have seen that from a West Brom team in the past after having drawn 0-0 with Aspire. Shows where maybe there's a bit of a gap between the two clubs right now. West Brom will be back. I am so certain of it. But right now, yeah, they're just not quite hitting the heights that they'd want to. And it does feel like they're just making sure they don't concede. They're shutting up shop at the back and trying to find a way to score goals. But I think by the end of this season, they'll be a much better team. And I think, yeah, it's just going to take some time.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's clearly by design. They're pragmatic because they have to be. And to be fair, they're doing it very well. When they decide to lock down a game, very few teams can pick that lock. The discipline in their defensive box is exceptional, and the patience they showed against Aspire in particular was textbook game management. Then, of course, there came that match against Muscle Warriors, 6-2 win, which was the complete opposite of all of their other games. It was as if all the attacking intent they bottled up across their first 4 fixtures was suddenly unleashed. They went all out, committed 4 players forward almost constantly. And while it left them open to the counter, which is where Muscle Warriors' 2 goals came from, the trade-off was worth it. It's finding that balance and that sweet spot the more the opposition scales up. It will give both Chris Gordon and Colin Gordon plenty to think about. Do they continue refining this solid defensive identity, or do they try to rediscover that attacking flair that has made them the dominant powerhouse of the last decade? I don't think there's any wrong answer, but it's about finding the balance. A quick word to Ollie Rock, registered his 50th National League goal during the weekend, a brilliant milestone for him. It was clear in Gameweek One that he and the other wide options, Brad Bates, Harry Beswick, Matt Gilbert, will have an incredibly tough task on their hands looking to replicate the output players like Marcus Harrison, Dylan Kelsall, Valentino Zegarelli provided. Certainly when they're not getting that link-up play from the central pairing. If we look ahead to Game Week 2, the fixtures offer opportunity. GBG United, Sevenoaks, Throstles and Villa. On paper, that's a weekend where Albion surely will be expecting to pick up maximum points, and that will put them towards the top of the table. So I would agree, don't write them off.
Yeah, I think writing them off at this point in the season would just be a very silly thing to do. They are going to grow into it, and I think they'll get some big wins. Like, I could see them. I don't think you're ever going to look at that fixture as long as Chris Gordon is there and think that that's an easy game. Like, it is always going to be a massive game. I said when I was commentating on it that it felt like a normal Aspire West Brom game. Like, the tension was massive. It was still felt like they were a top team, and every game involving them had a bit of extra intrigue on it. But yeah, I do think just a little bit of time on the training pitch is going to help them to hopefully refine that attacking style and get the wingers firing again, because West Brom, they should be a team that is scoring a lot of goals, and I don't want to see them redefine themselves as a more defensive team, because I just don't think that's great for the league. And also, I don't think they even want to do that themselves. I think it was out of pure necessity that they did it this weekend, and hopefully going into future weekends they'll be more confident and more accomplished to play a different way.
Not many people can secure clean sheets against Aspire, Newcastle and Greenbank. If we just focus on that, that's an incredible kind of statistic and fact. It's just making sure that's not at the detriment of goal scoring, which was clearly the case with that historic stat of their first ever time having more than one consecutive 0-0 draw. I think Jeff Lewis told me they've only ever had 17 0-0 draws in their entire history, 3 of which came within one single game week. So in 5th, we have Leeds PFC, a team everyone was desperate to watch, to analyse, to see how the new signings would fit. The arrival of Dylan Kelsall, Ethan Fisher were 2 of the biggest moves of the summer, and it was their first appearance together in Leeds colours at the National League level. Saturday was probably nothing short of a statement. Back-to-back 4-0 wins over Sevenoaks and Muscle Warriors. It was clinical, composed and flowing football. When Leeds click, it's some of the most aesthetically pleasing Powerchair football you'll see. The connection between the players is seamless, it's telepathic. Dylan Kelsall had a dream debut, 2 goals and an assist in that opener against Sevenoaks. Dan Rigby got off the mark in impressive fashion. Then came the real test, Sunday morning, the first time a team had properly asked questions of them against Middlesbrough, who pushed them hard. As we've already discussed, Leeds had to come from behind to win it 2-1. And afterwards, I had a chat with Ethan Galloway, from Middlesbrough, who said Jack Maxwell was the difference. And he's absolutely right. And before I pass you, Charlie, I owe Jack Maxwell an apology, because in all the previews, in all the predictions, in all the analysis of Leeds, so much of my focus has gone on the new arrivals, Dylan Kelsall, Ethan Fisher. And when I reference the core of last season, my attention goes to Dan Rigby and Lewis Harris. But Jack deserves just as much credit, if not more. He is a game changer. He is clinical. He is composed. He is easily one of the most complete wingers in the Premiership. He finished last season as joint top goal scorer, and he's already shown why. The brace against Middlesbrough effectively saved Leeds' perfect start. And for me, I voted him the unsung hero. Brilliant player that will ensure that those new players have to work for their placement in the team. Annoyingly, Charlie, I didn't catch any of the Leeds games live, being rooted to Court B. I know you watched a fair bit. What did you make of them? Because on their day, they looked unstoppable.
Yeah, I think that is the thing. It was very much an on their day kind of weekend. When they were good, they were great. The football is so high quality; it's fantastic. They're a fantastic team, and they've got such good players. And the fact that they can bring a player like Jack Maxwell, who was the Golden Boot winner last season, the fact they can bring him off the bench just shows the depth of that squad. What I would say is that when it's their day, it was their day. But when it wasn't their day, they were poor. Like the Greenbank game, they were poor in that game. They couldn't string a pass together. They didn't really seem to. They seemed quite one-dimensional. They didn't seem to have different levels that they could find in the game. I know it's early on, but they didn't really create many chances. All of it was quite just static and slow. Greenbank were good value for their win. It was the ultimate what's the word for it?
Housery.
Housery performance from Marcus Harrison. And Leeds fell for it, hook, line and sinker. It was fantastic from Greenbank. But that's the kind of game that if Leeds want to be title winners, which I'm sure that is the ambition, maybe not a desperate ambition, as in if they don't get it this season, they're going to be disappointed. But that's what they'll be aiming for, or at least they should be with the squad they have. That's the kind of game where you want them to find that different dimension, right? Can you change up a little bit? I think from a more tactical point of view, found it interesting, and I still didn't. I meant to go and talk to Leeds about it, and I never really got the opportunity. But they switched who was wearing the goalkeeper shirt a few times. Sometimes it was Ethan Fisher, sometimes it was Lewis Harris. I think when they get that nailed down, and it wasn't a 4-out really. I know they want to play that sort of England way and be that square. I don't think they ever truly achieved that this weekend. Maybe against Sevenoaks at times, but they were playing against 3 players, so they had that natural overload. But yeah, I don't think they necessarily got that quite right. Whether they'll develop that as the season goes on, they probably will. But yeah, I think there's definitely promising signs, and yeah, when they're good, wow, what a team.
Well, if they share any similarities to Leeds Dynamos in the Championship, they characterise it a 3.75 out, a 3 3/4 out. But I think we're almost being a little bit too harsh on Leeds, aren't we? That we're expecting them to hit these free flowing heights from the offset. They're going to need time to gel as a collective. Technically and tactically, there's no question they're good enough to be title contenders. The challenge for them, as I've said many times, will be psychological. This is the first time, the first season where there's genuine expectation, pressure that comes with being seen as one of the best teams of the division. How they handle that side of the game will ultimately define their season. You can see there's chemistry forming. Ethan Fisher has slotted in brilliantly, calm, he's intelligent, he's a great distributor. Dylan Kelsall already looks like he's played in that system for years. He is a sensational player, it must be said. Add in Dan Rigby's experience, Jack Maxwell's finishing, and it's a team that would terrify most others. What's encouraging for them is the fixture list. They haven't yet faced any of the real heavyweights, Aspire, Teesside, maybe West Brom. And while that will come later, it gives them the chance to build momentum now, to fine-tune their shape and keep that confidence flowing before Christmas. They do face Teesside in Gameweek 2, which will be a great benchmark. But overall, it's a fairly favourable run heading into 2026. So when you're trying to establish a new system and increase chemistry, it's facilitated it perfectly for them. They've also made no secret that they want to challenge deep in the Jonga Group WFA Cup this year. They want to be part of that finals day conversation at either Derby or St George's Park. And based on what we've seen, you wouldn't rule it out. But it's a fascinating one. I had them finishing 3rd because I think they need that grace period. And I think Gameweek 1 showed that. But when it does click, they will be an incredible team.
Yeah, I think that is the thing. And I think there will be that eureka moment, that eureka performance where we just think, yeah, they've arrived. And they will be very dominant in this league, I think, for years and years to come. So I have no concerns over Leeds whatsoever. No concerns.
In 4th, we have reigning Premiership champions Teesside. And unlike Leeds, I actually had the pleasure of watching all of their games across the weekend. And for me, it was the tale of 2 halves. Saturday was everything we've come to expect from Teesside, while Sunday, they just didn't hit the same heights. They flattered to deceive. Let's start with Saturday. Fixtures against Throstles and GBG Knights. My word, they were outstanding, faultless even. They played some of the most fluid, expansive, skillful football you'll see anywhere in the world. That 7-0 win over Throstles was the perfect opening statement. All 4 players contributed in attack. And once they built up that 3 or 4 goal cushion, they pushed on with a really brave 4-out system. Alistair Hay was getting forward. Ed Common was doing what Ed Common does best, dictating tempo, deceiving defenders with that incredible disguise in and out possession. No one does it better than him. and Tyler Reeve was central to absolutely everything. Mitch Tinkler is always ruthless in front of goal. I think he's got 8 across the opening weekend, joint top with Dan McLellan. Then came the 6-0 victory over GW1 Knights. And honestly, if you want a reference point for just how good Teesside can be, go back and watch that game. Some of the goals were breathtaking. The standout sequence for me, I think, was their 4th goal. Common, Reeve and Tinkler combining. Reeve fired a ball into the box. Common, full speed, driving onto it, shaped as if he was going to smash it first time with the front of his chair, let it roll through the defensive line at the very last second, perfectly waited for Mitch Tinkler to finish. It was the kind of move that defines the team's identity. Tinkler finished that match with 5 goals. And by the end of Saturday, I was there wondering who can stop them, who can nullify this attack. But Sunday told a different story. They got the job done against Villa professionally, as we've discussed, but it wasn't vintage Teesside. Villa frustrated them massively in the opening 10 minutes. And I wonder whether that gave Aspire the blueprint, because in that final fixture against the cup champions, Aspire were aggressive, they were organised, they had the greater attacking intent. Teesside just never got out of second gear, whether that was their own doing or the credit that we owe Aspire. So it was a challenging one for them. It's worth noting that Dylan Pearson and Greg Baxter were unavailable for selection, while head coaches Owen Swift and Paul Pearson were also absent. So that left them light in terms of coaching and tactical flexibility. They couldn't rotate or switch systems as freely as other sides, which no doubt played a part. Charlie, you and I have seen this team at their best so many times. When they're flying, they're almost untouchable. But do you think that lack of rotation or maybe the thin bench was a key difference on Sunday? What was your assessments?
I don't know, because it's not as if they had like a hellish schedule. Like, they realistically, I doubt they would have rotated much. Maybe in the Saturday games, but that wasn't where their problem came. On that Sunday, they wouldn't have rotated much anyway, I doubt. So I don't think it can be attributed to that. Obviously, Greg Baxter not being there, he was fantastic for them in the second half of last season. But, you know, in the past, they've beat Aspire with Alistair Hay in goal. Like, he was in there for the first game of last season, I think, between the two, where Teesside thrashed Aspire. So I can't necessarily attribute it to that. What I think I'd say is that even on the Saturday when they were playing fantastic football, it felt like they were still in sort of second or third gear. Same with Villa Rockets. And I was thinking, right, okay, so they're in second and third gear, but then they're going to explode for this Aspire game, right? And they're going to knock it to top gear and they're going to just be their best. And they just didn't really. Like, they managed to maybe, at times in the game, they managed to get it up to sort of gear 4 maybe, but they couldn't ever just reach that top level. And I think that is the risk with not just going into every single game completely on it, is that you end up, when it gets to a game where you really do need to be at the top of your form, you can't just knock yourself into it. I think it looks like the Aspire Teesside game, to me, looked like a game with one team who was super up for it, super prepared, just completely focused and determined, and another team that maybe didn't come into it with the right mindset or the right preparation. Like, there was definitely one side that were being more aggressive for the 3 points than the other. I think overall still a good weekend. 9 points from 12 is no disaster, and they're just gonna be right up there. And I think if a team finishes above Teesside this season, it's because they've won the league. That is my genuine prediction. I think they will be either first or second place. I don't see them getting finished above by 2 teams. But yeah, I think overall they played some of the best football of the weekend. Some of the goals they scored were beautiful. They're such a good footballing team, just elegance and grace personified. So many talented players in their ranks, and so many goals scored. But I would have liked to have seen them maybe just grow into the weekend a bit more than they did. The fact that the levels dropped so much between the Saturday and the Sunday, it doesn't necessarily bode well.
perfectly assessed. It's something that I said on commentary, certainly for those 2 games on Saturday. They looked like they was in second gear. It looked like that they could reach significant levels above what they were showing. And like you, I assumed that was conserving energy for the big one against Aspire, but it just didn't manifest in that way. They still only conceded once all weekend, which tells you how high their baseline level is. But the performance drop off on that second day was fairly noticeable. Well, look, when this is where champions show their character. Every team faces adversity, but the great ones are the ones who respond. Teesside now have that challenge in front of them to almost to reset, refocus and come back stronger in game week 2, where they'll face Newcastle United Foundation, Middlesbrough, Greenbank and Leeds. That's a huge run. And if they can rediscover their fluency, they'll be right back in that title picture. Even with that blip on Sunday, it's worth reminding ourselves they've still got the second best goal difference in the league and have a game in hand over first and second. Win that, they're a point behind the league leaders. So it's just funny that the standard they've set is so high that even maybe a substandard weekend still leaves them right in contention.
Yeah, that as I said, they'll be right up there. There's no doubt in my mind. Like, it's one result really, and they ground out the win against Villa, which was what champions do. So it's yeah, I'm not overreacting about Teesside yet. I think composure, they'll be very composed, and I think everybody assessing them should be the same.
In third, we have Greenbank PFC, a side that I flagged before the season as one to watch, because when you assess the players they have, the talent, the experience, the potential match winners, they could quite easily be considered as title contenders. Let's not forget that this is only their second ever season in the Premiership after debuting in 24-25. Last year, I think, was about establishing themselves. This year, it's about proving they belong among the elites. And if Gameweek 1 is anything to go by, they absolutely do. An unbeaten start across their 4 games, incredibly impressive when you consider the calibre of opposition they face. They opened with that 4-0 win over Villa, which for me was the perfect barometer of where they are. Villa are no pushovers, but Greenbank dealt with them with total control. And I said it on commentary at the time, and I meant it. That game could have gone on for an hour, 2 hours even, and Villa wouldn't have found a way through Marcus Harrison or Torbjorn Karup. They were that effective at breaking up rhythm and momentum, and it was so good to watch. But that's Greenbank in a nutshell. They're not always going to be the most eye-catching team, but they're stubborn, they're organised, they're relentless. They grind you down until there's nothing left, and then they find a way to hurt you. Charlie, give me your assessment. After watching them over the weekend, are we looking at a genuine title contender?
Oh, I've actually thought about this a lot. I thought going into the weekend, being 100% honest, I thought no way. I thought they'll be very similar to how they were last season, maybe slightly better because I think Jacob's developed and Crarup has settled in a bit better. But I don't know. I think first of all, I think they have the ability to draw any game 0-0 against any team in the world. Like, they have that game management just on lock. They're so defensively solid. And that's a big skill.
Just on that 0-0 draw with West Brom was probably the most predictable scoreline you are ever likely to see. 2 defensive juggernauts who are both happy to protect their shape. You've got Gordon and Chrysler on one side. You've got Harrison and Crarup on the other. It was defence versus defence, and it played out exactly as expected.
I think literally after 2 minutes of the game, someone came and sat next to me and were like, score prediction. And I just went, I just put 2 zeros up on my hands, and I was like, there's just no way that that there was going to be a goal in that game. They could still be be playing now, and I think it'd be 0-0, and Chris and Marcus would be in that corner somewhere, just dribbling with each other. But yeah, I think they have the tools. I just worry about the consistency. Like, are they going to drop some silly points? Are they going to be able to find? Because obviously they beat Leeds, which was massive, but it was very much like a freak goal late on in the game. Leeds switched off, and Crowett played just a perfect pass across to Luke Kelly. They won't be able to do that against every team, especially now they've done it once. Every team is going to think, oh God, we don't want that to happen to us, and be super switched on, especially late on. I think they've got a chance, obviously, but I still, when I look at the title race, I still come back to the three teams that have been mentioned by most people: Leeds, Aspiring, and Teesside. I don't know. I really don't know, because I could also see them finishing above one of those three definitely and stealing third place. Or so then, are they then a title contender? I'm not sure. I literally keep going back and forth on it. I just have no idea.
Their problems last season weren't about quality, were about player availability. I think Marcus Harrison missed a weekend. I think Luke Kelly missed a couple of weekends. Jacob Buck-Platt wasn't present across their 22 league games. If they can keep this squad together for the entirety of the season, there is no telling what they can do. I know Crowett came for the latter two weekends of the 5-game season in 24-25. He's committing to come for every weekend. So assuming they have that same solid squad, I would put them in that conversation. We have to talk about Marcus Harrison. He just has the ability to control a game like very few can. The way he locks it up in the dribble, slows the tempo, nullifies opponents is just extraordinary. He is the Momo Galame of the English game. He dictates everything. But the problem with Greenbank is, if you somehow manage to get past Marcus, you've got to deal with Crarup, who's every bit as stubborn. And that rotation and chemistry between them gives Greenbank such a solid wall and foundation. It was great to see Jacob Buck-Platt playing in such a prominent role. He's wearing the goalkeeper jersey, operating as the most defensive of the four players for the most part, but still has the bravery to advance up when the situation allows. When Luke Kelly features, you see the structure shift. I think Kelly becomes the final line of defence, and it frees Jacob Buck-Platt to get more involved higher up. Liam Fitzpatrick deserves a mention for his consistency and composure when called upon. Greenbank are just that side nobody wants to face. There is no space, there's no time, and the moment you overcommit, they punish you. And it's how they deal with the top teams. I think when we see them against the Aspires and the Teessides, ones that are there to win, expand the court, trying to break that press. Fascinating to see.
Yeah, I think they're going to be really good fixtures, really entertaining. I think that will be the big mark for me. I think Leeds, it was always going to be tough for them on their first weekend as that sort of new team, but against one of the established forces, it'll be really interesting to see how Greenbank do. And I think, I know I couldn't really give you a definitive answer on whether they're in the title race just now, but I think come up to me after they've played Aspire or Teesside and I will be able to give you an answer.
Well, on that topic, in game week 2, they've got Middlesbrough Muscle Warriors on Saturday, 2 games they'll expect to win before a double header against Teesside and Aspire in back-to-back fixtures. That will be the test of the endurance, the tactical discipline. They've also got a game after that in West Bromwich Albion and Throstles. So, as we were saying earlier, 3 games on a Sunday, fairly unique. If they come out of that with favourable point accumulation and are not on the receiving end of defeats to Teesside, Aspire, maybe even both, they've got to be considered title contenders.
Yeah, I mean, they do have to be. It will just be, yeah. I'm so excited for those 2 games on that day. It's going to be so dramatic. And yeah, after that day, we'll know 100% where they're going to be this season.
Right, let's talk about Newcastle United Foundation in second. And I'll be honest, I've been so impressed with how they've handled this new chapter. They've lost 2 huge figures in Ethan Fisher and Sam Smith, and yet somehow look just as balanced, just as mature, just as at ease with who they are as a team and a system as they've ever been. 4 wins, 1 draw, no goals conceded. That's an outstanding return, especially when you factor in the transition they've had to navigate. Their defensive structure was incredible last season. I think they went on a 13 or 14 clean sheet run. At this level is mind-blowing, really. And they've carried it through to 25-26. It's like muscle memory. They just don't look like conceding. Charlie, they were the Swizzles team of the weekend, and rightfully so. Jamie Harrison, coach of the weekend, and rightfully so. And Ollie Crawshaw, very close to being awarded the standout player of the weekend. For you, what stood out about across their game in Gameweek One?
I think Ollie just, wow. Like, I knew he'd be able to do the step up. I had a lot of confidence in speaking to other players, the ones in my household. They were very confident. Dan was very confident that he's played enough with Ollie and knows him enough as a person that he's going to be absolutely fine and step up with ease. But I just wasn't expecting it to be to the extent that it was. I think 9 points would have been a fantastic weekend. 9 points out of 15. I was thinking, yeah, if they can do that, that'll be great. But the fact that they've come out and they're joint top of the league in terms of the points, and obviously only second to Aspire because of goal difference, is so impressive. I could just wax lyrical about Newcastle, and it just feels like they've got their joy for football back. Last season didn't feel that as much, but their fans this weekend were loving it. There was chanting, and the Toon Black and White Army was just ringing around. There was such a togetherness in the group. They were smiling, laughing, happy. Cole Simpson has had to make a big step up. I think I said on commentary at some point, I don't even think it was on a Newcastle game. I think we just ended up talking about them. And I said that, he's had to step up from sort of the secondary winger to the primary winger, and he's done that very well. And his performances have probably only gone under the radar because of how good Ollie's been in the middle. Yeah, it's just fantastic to see. I'm so pleased for Newcastle. I'm so pleased for them, because if they'd had a bad weekend, I think it really would have knocked their confidence and really would have knocked Ollie's confidence. But the fact that they can come out and say, this is how many points we got. We took on all these teams. They were the better side in that West Brom game, 100%. And they should have won. They had great chances, really good chances, and they just couldn't convert them, which happens sometimes. But yeah, they will be a massively tough team to beat this season. I think people will really look at that game and think, similarly to Greenbank, yeah, this is going to be really difficult for us. Teams at the top of the table. I think Ollie he's got it all in his locker. He's a fantastic player. I don't just want to just rave about how good they are, because I don't want to put too much pressure on them, but I was so pleased for them, so pleased for Ollie and his family and his dad on the sidelines watching. Just fantastic. Fair play to Newcastle. They got my vote for team of the weekend, and I think it must have been pretty much unanimous because they were just brilliant.
Yeah, I completely agree. I voted the exact same. I truly rate Jamie Harrison as one of the best countries, not just in the country, but the world. He has built this clear, structured identity. You've got Lee Armstrong anchoring from deep. You've got Ollie Crawshaw just beautifully orchestrating play. Cole Simpson does so much of the dirty work between the lines, defence and attack. And then that fourth winger role, I said it when I was referencing Middlesbrough, the same can be applied to Newcastle, where they rotate between several options. Kieran Steer, Matty Harrison, Sam Mackay, Aaron Guthrie. What's so impressive is whoever fills that slot, the standard never drops. And that's a testament to Jamie's coaching. He's got every player understanding their role, detailed, drilled. Ollie, my God, he was my player to watch because I was eager to see how he stepped up to this increased expectation, needing to be the leader, the creator in the absence of Sam Smith and Ethan Fisher. He's carrying the armband with such confidence and composure, and it doesn't seem to faze him at all. He just gets on with it. He is a sensational player. And I truly believe if he continues this level of performance, he will pose some very interesting questions to England coach Adam McAvoy ahead of Buenos Aires, not after. He's destined for the England senior team. If he continues like this, there is a conversation to be had. I don't want to put pressure on the situation. I don't want to say he has to be there, and if he's not, it's a disappointment. Far from it. I just want to highlight how good this young man is and how high his ceiling is. I commentated their 1-0 win over Sevenoaks, which turned into one of the most debated moments of the weekend, as we've discussed. The winning goal came the very last minute, Crawshaw's effort. But for me, they were knocking on the door for the whole game, and they were probably good value for the win. Dominated possession, created better chances, and stayed patient. And that's the word that defines them right now, is patient. They're happy to wear teams down, to wait for the opening when it comes and they take it. And I love how they've embraced the idea of rebuilding without the weight of expectation. Jamie Harrison has said that he enjoys not being labelled title contenders anymore. It frees them up to focus purely on performances, and it's working. However, they had a slightly favourable fixture list on paper with both promoted sides plus Sevenoaks. It doesn't diminish the quality of their performances. The real test comes in game week 2. They face Teesside, Aspire and Leeds in consecutive fixtures. It's a brutal run. If they come out of that with 3, 6, 9, 7 points, whatever the accumulation is, whether they like it or not, they're going to have the title of challengers again.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that is the real test, isn't it? I think maybe not 3, but if it's anything, if it's, maybe 4 points, maybe 6 points, they're going to be right in the mix again. That is the real test. I mean, there is a caveat, and I didn't want to say it, but like they probably had, in terms of in the league, one of the most favourable opening weekends, playing teams that you'd expect you'd expect them to beat generally, or at least expect the games to be close. But I don't want to even talk about that to take it away from it. But yeah, I think that next weekend is going to be massive because they have the 3 biggest title contenders in consecutive games, and that is just going to be the deciding thing. And if they don't go and get any points there, and they do what people would have expected them to do before the season starts, then they get beat by all 3 of those teams, or they lose 2 and they maybe get a draw in 1. Who cares? Because it's still been a fantastic start to the season, and it's very much a rebuild for Newcastle. But if they do, well, we all know what that means. It'll be great to watch. I'm looking forward to all of those games. They're very entertaining. They're very easy to watch. They're just, and also you do find yourself just rooting for them sometimes in games where you probably shouldn't be, just because of they're such a personable team. They're very talkative. They're very friendly. Just the Geordie spirit that they have is fantastic. And yeah, they're going to be one of the best teams to watch this season. And you spoke about maybe West Brom, Greenbank, Newcastle. Maybe that's a little sort of league table on its own. If we're saying that those 3 aren't quite ready to challenge for the title yet, well, it'll be really interesting to see who finishes 4th, 5th, 6th out of those 3, because you'd think it will be those 3 in that in some capacity. And could they win that mini league table? Maybe.
Yeah,
Who knows?
very possibly. I don't disagree. They had a fairly favourable fixture list, but that still doesn't mean that it should be a formality. 5 consecutive clean sheets. Ridiculous at this standard when we're talking about this as the top Powerchair Football League anywhere worldwide. Like you, I think we're fairly well versed as commentators by this point, where we have to be objective. We have to commentate on what we're seeing. We're not allowed favourites. But I do have a massive soft spot for them. and I love to see them succeed. And I will say, Albie Morris will be looking down, beaming with pride at this group, because they're an incredible bunch of players, of people, and I'm willing them to go on and just enjoy themselves. And that's ultimately, again, what they're doing. They're having a good time. They're playing amazing football. They're getting results. But the top of the wish list is playing with a smile on their face. And that's exactly the way Jamie Harrison's got them playing. So congratulations to them. As mentioned, game week 2 is the benchmark, is the barometer. Teesside to open before playing Aspire and Leeds before ending with Middlesbrough. So we will sit down at the conclusion of game week 2 and we will assess what title we associate with them. Now, let's head to the top of the table, our last team, Aspire, because they really came out with a bit between their teeth in game week 1. 5 games played, 4 wins, 1 draw, none conceded, 14 goals scored. That's not just a strong start. It's a clear statement. It's the kind of weekend that reminds everyone exactly why they've been standard setters, standard bearers for so long. They were relentless from the off. That opening 4-0 win over Muscle Warriors set the tone. They controlled every aspect of the game. And you could see the sharpness, the tempo, the familiar chemistry between the attacking players. Dan McLellan picking up where he left off last season. John Dixon, now my favourite player in the division. Rich George marking his return to the National League for the first time since 2022. I'll let you talk about the game against West Bromwich Albion because I wasn't there to commentate. But as a whole, when you look at Aspire's weekend, the control, the clean sheets, the fluidity, what stood out most for you about how they started?
Yeah, I think it looked like they'd never been away. Obviously, they've had such great preparation for this season. You know, John Bowling said on the podcast last time out that it was the best they've ever had. And you could tell that there was just no rust. They came out against Muscles and they moved the ball brilliantly. Some of the football they've played is some of the best I've ever seen them play, in terms of the triangles and just being devastating. They just that outfield 3 of John Bowling, John Dixon and Dan McLellan, I think I could be in goal behind it and keep a clean sheet. Like, they are so good. Even with the issues, surrounding the goalkeeper, Tom Kelly had to go home ill on Saturday night. He missed the final 3 games of the weekend. And then Jordan Williams, who was meant to come in and play in goals, tyre punctured on that Sunday morning. And so all the drama, and they just sort of took it in their stride and went with it. And Jordan, who's not a natural goalkeeper, was in goal against Teesside. And I don't really remember him having to make a save. And that's against Teesside, who are probably the most dangerous team in the league in terms of attacking. Yeah, I think Aspire are really here to stay this season. They're going to really compete. I think that central partnership of Dan McLellan and John Bowling is so dominant. Obviously, Dan getting his first, I think, standout player of the weekend of his career, as a benchmark of, what's happened with him in the last year. And the fact that him, John Bowling and John Dixon were all in the team of the weekend as well. Like, wow. Fantastic for Aspire. Great weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan McLellan, simply on another level. 5 games, 8 goals. I think he got 4 assists. Fully deserving of the Swizzles Player of the Weekend. His energy, his time, and his finishing, absolutely outstanding. What impresses me most is his decision making. He's not just scoring, he's influencing every part of Aspire's play. Then there's John Bowling. We have to talk about him. I loved sitting down with him a few days before the season kick-started. And the reason I really wanted to get him on the podcast is because I wanted to discuss the public scrutiny that he received after and during the Euros, and how he processed it and how he was going to use that and channel it in a positive way. And my God, was Gameweek One the perfect response. He looked vintage John Bolden, sharp, composed, complete control. And he didn't need to get on the score sheet because he dictates everything from deep, orchestrating the tempo. And he knows that in John Dixon and Dan McLellan, there is potent goal scorers. And it's not a coincidence that John Bolden's goal accumulation in the last 2-3 years has dropped off massively, but that's coincided with this meteoric rise of Dan McLellan. And he knows that as long as they get the goals, they get the performances, he doesn't need to be in the headlines. And that's what makes him an incredible player, an incredible leader. And the players feed off that confidence that he gives. So, he is just an incredible person, and it's so good to see him back playing with confidence and a little bit of arrogance, that I mean in the best possible sense. John Dixon, people are going to get bored us talking about John Dixon on this podcast, but I will never tire of it. His evolution over the past year has been incredible. He's not just a threat in the wide areas anymore. He's timing his runs perfectly. He's linking up intelligently. He looks every bit a senior leader now. He and McLellan have developed almost a telepathic understanding. They know exactly where each other will be. And he will be knocking on the door of England development squad. I have no doubt. He is that good at the moment. And I think this is just the base. I think he's found his confidence that's gone alongside his solid attributes that he had from his grounding at West Bromwich Albion. But now we're going to see him get better and better. And his performances, his levels are going to coincide with Aspire performing at the very, very top. It was great to see Rich George back. You could tell he's still adjusting to the pace, the intensity of the National League, but his reading of the game is still there. His positioning is there. Give him a few weekends, he'll be right back to his very best. And if he can emulate the rise we've seen in John Dixon, John Bolden has an incredibly tough job in his hands in picking a solid squad, but that's what you want. And to your point, Jordan Williams deserves so much credit. With Tom Kelly unwell, he stepped in between the posts for their toughest day of fixtures, and he looked like he'd been doing it for years. He was calm, he was composed, positionally he was excellent, and it's that type of confidence under pressure will be invaluable. And it might even give Aspire some tactical flexibility going forward if they want to experiment with Tom Kelly higher up the court, if they need that goalkeeper option, because he did it so brilliantly and it was against Teesside, someone we're talking about as the best attacking team in the country.
Yeah, I think that Teesside game was the game of the weekend. I think anybody before the game would have said, before the weekend would have said that. I think it was just, when I say the game of the weekend, I don't mean the most entertaining one, but the most important one and the one that you probably learn the most from. Aspire were beaten 3-0 by them on both occasions last season, and that was a real benchmark of where Aspire were at. And so to come out and be, I don't think it's unfair to say that Aspire were dominant in that game. They had Teesside pinned back for large spells of it. They looked in control at all times, and it looked almost an inevitability that goal was going to come at some point, somehow, for Aspire. I think that was the big one for me, was that Teesside game, and the fact that they've sort of broken that duck, and they know that they can now beat Teesside and compete with them. It'll be. I'm really excited about Aspire this season. I think listening to the predictions episode, I'm not the only one. I think lots of people were saying lots of good things, and just feels like now might be the time for Aspire to really relaunch themselves. I was looking this morning. I don't think they've had a better National League weekend since 2023. I think 2024, obviously they won the Champions Cup that year, but in the league they were quite disappointing. And then obviously last season they didn't really have any top quality National League weekends. They lost a few games in every one, and they were not the best in the big games. But And I think even you look at the West Brom game this weekend, I know that they were frustrated that they couldn't beat West Brom, but that's more because they beat them the last couple of times. They beat them in the last league game of last season. They beat them in the cup final. They beat them 3-0 in the West Midlands Regional League the week before. And so I think it was more just like, we couldn't deliver it on the big stage. But when you actually look back at the game, I watched it live and I thought it was a game of few chances. But I've actually looked back and I saw 3 sitters that Aspire missed. And John Dixon missed one on the back post. Then Dan McLellan did the same. And then John Boulding, they did a really well worked set piece where Dixon put the ball across and then Dan played it back in towards the near post, and John Bowling could have just swiped it home and he couldn't quite get the angle on it. And so 3 big chances that Aspire had, and on another day they take 1 or 2 of them and it's a comfortable win. So yeah, they'll take a lot of positives out from the opening weekend. I know that they'll not get too excited because there's still a long way to go and don't want to be naive, but if they can just keep that going and keep the points ticking along and keep dominating and especially if they keep improving at the rate that they've improved over the last year, by the end of the season they're going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, when you assess game week 2, they open with Sevenoaks before playing Newcastle. And on the Sunday, they play Villa and Greenbank. So some really interesting tests to see how good this Aspire team are. And if they come out of game week 2 with some really favourable points and results, there's a fairly big gap between the end of game week 2 and the start of game week 3, just shy of 3 months, obviously over the winter period. You don't want to sit in that period with a negative game week 2. It can play really significantly psychologically into your mindset. So if they can come out of that with 12 points, 10 points, and ensure they're still towards the top of the standings, then they could be the benchmark. They could be favourites for the 25-26 Premiership crown. And I think that wraps up our recap of Game Week 1 of the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership. It was an incredible week of football. Just to check, the next weekend in the league is the 13th and 14th of December. So mark that in your calendars. That wraps up episode 38 of the 2-on-1 Powerchair Football Podcast, powered by MK Battery. And Matthew, thank you as always to everyone tuning in for sharing your thoughts, for continuing to support the show. It really does mean a lot. We've got some incredible episodes lined up, so keep an eye out for those. Of course, a thank you to MK Battery for their ongoing partnership and commitment to powering this podcast. Thank you all, and thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.